Hype.
Welcome, everybody, to Thunder's Applause with Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together and talk about the events and ideas that will shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. What is up? I feel like I'm not square.
You're not centered, that's for sure. You are.
Maybe I'm sitting up too straight.
Maybe. It's probably good for your posture, though.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
And, friend was in town for a business meeting, and so we met up for lunch or dinner, rather. And then that went kind of late and had to watch the obligatory show with the kids. They're going to their grandma's tomorrow afternoon for like 3 weeks. And
it's definitely New Mexico grandma.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's an offline conversation, but I don't think I'd trust them with my parents for 3 days, let alone 3 weeks.
We believe you now.
Damn it. Yeah, no, and so they're gonna be gone. So we're just I don't know, we might binge the last like 6 episodes of Bad Batch season 2, but I just don't want it to like burn all the way into the fucking school year, and we're still trying to finish the Bad Batch. And like Ahsoka's coming out, like, and I kind of wanted to stick around and watch. Well, it comes out like right around Sophie's birthday.
I think it's like
my eldest daughter's birthday, like and right around the first day of school. So that's kind of one where like I'm not sure if I'll watch it when it comes out because it comes out at like midnight on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So like the kids are in bed.
Yeah.
But I might just wait to Thursday to watch it. But then I like to watch Rebel Force Radio's like after show, like which airs at 5 or 6 or something like that. Wednesday night. So I'm like, we can't, or Thursday evening before we'd have a chance to watch it. Plus we have like a internal policy about not watching TV with kids during school nights. So I haven't figured it out, but I do want to get rid of. I would like to finish the Bad Batch before the kids leave for essentially the rest of the summer.
Yeah. You want to finish your commitment.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. What's on the agenda tonight? We're going to finally get back to talking a little bit about industrial civilization and its consequences at the latter half. But first, we are cuckoo for cuckoo.
Let's start some news, man. We got some fucking shit about Russia and a little bit of a coup, apparently by a mercenary group. I didn't know mercenary groups could coup. But I mean, they are for sale to the highest bidder. So maybe someone outbid them.
I have an opinion on it. I don't think, to preface this, by now most folks have heard about it, but I think it's interesting. So we are gonna talk about this primarily through the words of Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden. And then we can have a short discussion about it. We will not do it justice. I highly recommend checking out Richard Medhurst has covered it pretty extensively among a couple other people. Check out their discussions on it. And then also after that, we are going to have a brief discussion about, if these guys indeed were trying to attempt to overthrow the government, what is the likelihood of that happening here in the United States? So I'll have a little clip from a guy from my distant past that I have a kind of, relationship with his material and his ideas. And then after that, we'll talk about Uncle Ted. And we'll be done in an hour.
Yes, we will. And then I will work on programming a Raspberry Pi Pico. That is funsies.
Yeah.
Thus far, I figured out how to sense temperature, report temperature, use the temperature variable to affect outside devices, but not in the way that I want. And so I need to just like kind of sit down and take the thing that we like planned out and put it in programming language. We're like, oh, if it's above this temperature, turn this on. If it's above this temperature, turn this on. If it goes below this, turn this off, boom. And so thankfully I've got some LEDs that I can use to simulate the power supply.
Mm-hmm.
So if they turn on, means it's on. So you get a little bit of a nice indicator. It turns out to be a really cool system. You just hook it up to your PC and then tell it to run on the Raspberry Pi Pico, and just kind of watch the outputs to gather what's going on. And so you get the LEDs as just a way of like, yeah, that's working how
Visual
I wanted it to.
observation. That the program is working.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Working as intended.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll have to have a additional discussion offline about the code or this program you're using to interface the computer with the Raspberry Pi, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Let us get started. Starting with the man, the myth, the legend.
The horse riding, shirtless son of a bitch.
The grizzly bear riding. Ex-KGB.
Вооруженный мятеж в любом случае был бы подавлен.
Do you want to read that?
Организация
Back it up and
мятежа,
we'll just read it.
несмотря на утерю адекватности,
Start it over.
Yeah, I sneezed right before we came in.
в любом
An armed
случае
rebellion
был
would
бы
have been
подавлен.
suppressed in any case.
Организаторы
The
мятежа,
organizers of the rebellion,
несмотря на утерю
despite being
адекватности,
inadequate,
не могли этого не
could not fail
понимать.
to
Мы знали и
understand this.
знаем, что подавляющее
We
большинство
knew, and
бойцов
we
и
know.
командиров
Oh
группы
boy, too fast.
и этого не понимают. Мы знали и знаем, что
We knew
подавляющее
and we know that the
большинство
vast majority of
бойцов и
fighters and
командиров группы
commanders of the
Вагнера
Wagner group
это тоже
are also
патриоты
Russian
России,
patriots,
преданные
devoted
своему
to
народу
their
и
people,
государству.
and still
Поэтому
mercenaries are devoted to whoever you give, or whoever gives them money.
Aha.
Go
More
ahead.
on that in a minute.
Okay.
с самого
Therefore, from the beginning
начала
of the
событий
events,
по моему прямому
on my direct
поручению
instructions, steps were
предпринимались
taken to
шаги,
avoid a lot of
чтобы
bloodshed.
избежать большой крови. Благодарю
I think
тех
those
солдат и
soldiers and
командиров группы
commanders of the
Вагнер,
Wagner
которые
group
приняли
who made the only
единственно
right
правильное
decision.
решение. Не пошли на
They did not turn to
братоубийственное
fratricidal
кровопролитие.
bloodshed. They stopped at the last line.
Остановились у последней черты. Сегодня у вас есть
Today,
возможность
you have the opportunity to
продолжить
continue
службу
serving Russia
России, заключив контракт
by
с
entering into a
Министерством
contract with the
обороны
Ministry of
или
Defense
другими
or other
силовыми
law enforcement
органами,
agencies,
либо вернуться к
or
своим
return
родным и
to your
близким.
family and friends.
Кто хочет, сможет
Whoever
уйти в
wants can go to
Белоруссию.
Belarus.
Данное мною
The
обещание
promise I made
будет
will be
исполнено.
fulfilled. So he's like, hey, join us. Don't join us. Go back to your families. But either get out of Wagner Group or go to Belarus.
Right. Okay, so ton of discussion online. When this first happened, of course, like the American media was like, oh, yeah, they're going to fucking get rid of Putin. And you're like, well, Prigozhin, I don't know the guy, and I know very little of his history except that he was fairly close to Putin for a long time. Like, I think was like a contractor or something. I heard he was contracted to be like a caterer at the official state house or whatever.
Okay.
Right? Kind of weird.
Cater
Right?
bullets.
No, he was actually like he owned restaurants and shit, and then got hired to be a caterer, basically the executive caterer. Cool, right on. And then now he's like leading a fucking military group. But
he's up there like, I am so not prepared for this.
Right. I think he seems so, but he's been very vocal, and I honestly think that a big part of his like and I might have mentioned this, we might have had this discussion before, where his flavorful language, like, to me feels almost like it's meant to be theater, like it's very theatrical when he's like, and we don't have any ammo, when it's like there's no other evidence suggesting that you're that short on arms. And like he could genuinely just be pissed after, like, a lot of his fucking men died.
Yeah.
In various kind of protracted conflicts like the Battle of Bakhmut. And so, like, I don't know, it just to me smelled of more political theater and not something to be taken seriously. But of course, the US media jumped on it, and pro-Ukrainian media outlets jumped on it, and it was over in like less than a day. Or what was it, 36 hours?
36 hours, yeah.
Okay, so barely a day.
Yeah.
And the consequence is, oh, you're being exiled, and if your troops choose, they can go with you to Belarus, who we just recently put under our nuclear umbrella. Like just a few weeks ago, they moved fucking tactical nukes to Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
And so Belarus is now under, and I don't know exactly what's going on in that country. But I do know that Kiev is in the north near the Belarusian border. And so you could potentially be having this veteran very experienced military unit, the Wagner group, positioning themselves really close to the capital. And maybe not. Maybe it was legitimate. Maybe he got mad and he said, I'll do this. And then he realized, oh shit, like he pulled a Rick Sanchez basically and did all sorts of crazy shit when he was blacked out drunk. Cause like, it's clear the dude has a drinking problem. And I'm not trying to stereotype Russians or anything, but Prigozhin definitely looks like he probably has a heavy drinking habit. And he's also, in a conflict zone where you have all sorts of other kind of emotional and mental stressors and triggers, right?
Yeah.
At any rate, so maybe it was legitimate and he legitimately like exiled him to Belarus, but I don't think that was it. It felt too theatrical. It was over too quick and negotiated like too smoothly.
So you're suggesting, from the sounds of it, that basically it's like, oh no, you can go to Belarus, and then it's like, now I have crack troops in Belarus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, and because to me, it's beyond the pale for a mercenary group to say like, we're out of bullets, and that's somehow your fault. It's like, no, you're a mercenary group. You buy your bullets wholesale from like somebody else. You don't get them from the military.
Yeah, and that's not, people define mercenary differently. I always identified myself as a mercenary. I was like, I was not invested in the cause. I was invested in getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was not a rifle carrying force. And they now call mercenary armies PMCs, which you might hear Wagner PMC a lot, which just means professional military contractor, private military contractor, I think.
Like Black Hawk or whatever it is.
Yeah, precisely. Like the U.S., the U.S. Has its own mercenary armies for all intents and purposes. But as far as them being patriots, I think the contractors employed would be like American contractors employed in a similar outfit, providing physical security and stuff. And so, yeah, I do believe genuinely that many of the people who worked for or continue to work for Wagner are Russian patriots and believe in the Russian state. So I don't think that's an incorrect statement.
Okay.
Although certainly they are in it for money, like it doesn't necessarily remove their allegiance to the state or whatever.
To me, it really is. The way that I hear people talk about it, it sounds like there's the military and then there's the, like higher ups in the military, like, oh, I am a ranger, I am a SEAL, I am, whatever else there is. There's other ones that I'm Top Gun. And then there's mercenary groups that are like, oh, we deserve so much more than the military is willing to pay us. And so we're just going to contract. And we're basically like the A team. Yeah. It's like, we're basically the A team. If you have a problem that can't be solved by anyone else.
Right. Except the big one is like survivor benefits and medical benefits and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not sure what their contract looks like, but that's usually how you get paid more. Is that like you don't get all the frills. You're definitely not going to see the dentist every year, right? Like unless you pay out of your own pocket, which is true. But at any rate, I think that was just kind of interesting and almost like too easy.
Yeah.
And my gut has been correct on a lot of fucking things. On a lot of things.
Has it been incorrect though?
I get shit wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, but
as long as we're not having a success bias.
Right. No, but my thing is like, I don't want to think the worst, even though like I am absolutely 100% expecting nuclear detonation somewhere in my region in California, like at least one of the larger cities or more important cities. However, even thinking that's a possibility, like in the next decade, or even next few years, I still don't think that they put the tactical nukes there just to like store them with some troops in case they needed them. And then they send these kind of like now established as these bombastic fucking rogues, right? Oh, are they going to steal the nuke? Because like one of my understanding too is one of Prigozhin's biggest complaints is that Shoigu, I think is the defense minister, and Putin himself have restricted the amount of damage they can do. Like their mindset is it's them or us, and this is total war. This is how I interpret it based on the various sources I've looked at over the last many weeks. But basically, I get the vibe that like they were upset that they were in these fucking meat grinders when like they have the equipment and the skill to fucking punch through and kill a lot of motherfuckers by leveling city blocks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the higher ups, including Putin himself, are like, there's a PR game here. We can't just total war.
Well, and that's
right?
so similar though to like how you had all the people in the army that were like supposed to be just killing machines. You go in, you find the enemy, you kill them, and they got tasked with basically like running cities and shit like that. And so they're like, we're not meant for this. We're meant to blast and destroy, and you're basically having us doing police work, like peacekeeping police work. So it's like, yeah, I can see it being a very similar situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what Sleepy Joe's got to say about it.
Oh man. Okay.
This is your president. This is your next president.
I watched this 6 times and didn't know exactly what I should
To continue to support Ukraine's defense and its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. He and I agreed to follow up and stay in constant contact. I'm also in constant contact with our allies to maintain our coordination. I'll be speaking with the head of state right after this meeting today and making sure we're on the same page. I didn't get a chance to speak with one head of state yesterday. We're going to keep assessing the fallout of this weekend's events and the implications for Russia and Ukraine. But it's still too early to reach a definitive conclusion about where this is going. The ultimate outcome of all this remains to be seen. But no matter what comes next, I will keep making sure that our allies and our partners are closely aligned in how we are reading and responding to the situation. It's important we stay completely coordinated.
We don't know what's going on, but I will promote synergy.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
What I hear.
Yeah.
Like a boss.
I'm live, right?
You're live, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, I muted because I was burping while that was playing.
Gotcha.
And I thought I was still muted. No, dude. First of all, like he's barely coherent. He caught himself though, so they must be doing some like really like innovative, cutting edge, not yet approved for the general public old timer disease fucking drugs. Because did you see him catch himself? He's like, almost like he rebooted.
Hey man,
or there was a lag or something.
I saw the same thing with every president for the last 5 years. Wait, 6 years.
Remember on that one that you're queuing up now? I know it's not on screen. That's fine. But remember we're starting around 32 or whatever, section head surrogacy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we'll just read that section because I don't think it's very long, and we'll get there in a minute. Anyway, it's interesting because like they're like, oh, we really don't know what's going on, and the reality is like that is an accurate statement, first of all. But like your state media apparatus, which is like all of the corporate news, right, was 100% on board, like with saying like how this is the end and like you just more proof that Ukraine is winning and Russia is weak and this, that, and the other thing. And I believe the administration officials or press secretaries or whoever also made similar statements early on. Then Joe Biden addressing it is like, we don't really know, because like they'll take it's all about perception again, like kind of like Putin and Shoigu or whatever telling fucking Prigozhin and Wagner that it's like you can't do total war, like, because like perception matters, right?
Yeah.
And I mean it's still an absolute fucking bloodbath. I'm not saying it's not, like they're holding way back, like, and soldiers in the field will do all sorts of fucking shifty shit that they're fucking, their guiding documents and principles tell them they shouldn't be doing. They'll do it anyway because it's a fucking war zone. There are no rules, right? The only rule is if you fuck around, you find out, right? Like you can get yourself killed. That's like the only rule.
Try not to die.
Try not to die and try to kill, right? Yeah. Those are the rules. At any rate, I do think that the media played with this, and how quickly it ended and how smoothly it transitioned out of just makes me think it was fucking political theater to throw off the West.
Mhm.
I can't tell you for certain it was masking some, military maneuver
Yeah.
or covering for some other kind of thing. I do know just over the last few days, Ukraine finally made finally made a little bit of headway.
Mm.
I don't think I didn't have time because I was out to dinner and stuff to get all the information I needed, but I don't think they've made it to the first defensive line. They just crossed the river. But they did cross the river in several places, and they have consolidated multiple attack lines they had. They did consolidate that into a sectional front. So it does look like morale for the Russians, or maybe just luck a lot. If you just keep throwing shit, it's just rolling dice, right? The more you roll the dice, you're bound to fucking get the number you want, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like them being able to take more territory, it's insignificant still, but like probably the first substantive gains that I've seen so far in the counteroffensive, and we're in week 2.
Yeah.
So I'll be watching that closely.
Agree.
But I don't think this coup thing was actually a coup. And I'm not sure what happened or what the exact motivation was. I don't think it was unexpected. And I don't think it was just like a spontaneous, there wasn't a lot of energy behind it. I honestly think that if anything, if it wasn't for moving troops and getting Wagner and everybody into Belarus, then it was just to root out people. Like there were either intelligence or whatever was like, hey, you actually have like some significant factions within Russian territory or within the army or whatever that don't want to be fighting and want to overthrow the regime. And so then they rooted them out. And it wasn't like Wagner basically just helped root them out, right?
Yeah.
Or helped create the conditions where they would expose themselves.
Right. And I was just thinking like, we have something labeled as a coup, and we just sent everyone back home for the most part, like right away. No one was, as far as I know, detained or anything like that. And so people got to take their supposedly toxic ideas back home and spread them amongst all the people in their hometowns.
Put them all over social media to
Put them all
vent
over
or whatever.
social media, like kind of give people the idea that like, hey, you can do a little bit of a coup and you won't get in trouble either.
Well, maybe, I don't know. At any rate, it probably will have zero substantive consequence for anybody involved.
Right.
And it was something for the media to get excited about. Just like they've been talking about this goddamn sub for fucking 2 weeks. I'm still hearing stuff about that.
Oh my God, dude. I heard about it and I was like, they're dead.
Yeah, I think we talked about it Thursday briefly.
Yeah, they went pop.
But my point is that like, yeah.
Well, when you have the
distracting
24-hour
from
news
Hunter
cycle
Biden or whatever.
Well, distracting or not, you have to have some shit to talk about in a 24-hour news cycle. And so you just have whatever.
Yeah. The sub story was perfect because that was the kind of like seat of your pants,
it was a
like
big old
drama. Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but it dredged up all the people that are like, I hate billionaires, so I don't care. And it's like, yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
I did see something where like all the fucking eat the rich memes just like resurfaced overnight.
Yeah. With new forms and orcas involved. Because people are getting, the orcas and the billionaires inflated in their minds. It's fantastic.
So speaking of social media, our next clip actually talks about that a bit. And I'm not on social media. And one of the things I miss the most, especially in moments like these, is the fucking memes. Because I should at least subscribe to like a couple Reddit channels so I can like scroll the best memes of the day or the week or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I do miss good memes. I get some of them in my YouTube community feed.
Yeah. Well, the wifey's
There's a
got
couple
her
really
like
good ones.
daily
Go ahead.
meme harvest. Like she wakes up before I do, and she's like, meh, meh, reaches over, grabs the phone, do harvesting memes for the day. Then she spreads them out, gives them away to everybody throughout the day.
I love it.
Oh
Okay,
no, it was far too many memes for me to eat on my own. I have to share.
So the next clip is from a channel called Out of Our Mind.
Just out of my head, and it's
Out of
all
my head.
one word. I meant to fix that.
And this is KMO. He is a guy who I go way back with intellectually, back to like 2010, 2011. He had a
Yes.
podcast called The Sea Realm.
Still does, apparently. It's been a while, but
he does? Okay.
Yeah, it's still there. It's just been a while. I think it's been like a year, maybe 2 since he posted. And he also references someone, if you're paying attention to the post that he shows, called Margot Said So on Reddit, if anybody wants to look into that.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's a Reddit channel called, he talks about it, I think, in this, but Subid Poll or Stupid Poll,
Mm-hmm.
which is like Stupid Poll.
Mm-hmm.
It's clever. Anyway, he's basically discussing this Reddit thread where they are talking about it's for Marxism without the identity politics, is what he says the description of the subreddit is. And so he reads a couple posts out of there, and we're going to have a brief discussion about those.
Yep.
And hopefully be done in less than 10 minutes.
Yo.
Somebody posted the following today. Is social media siphoning the spontaneous energy that would otherwise be spent on real-world revolution? I keep coming back to this idea, and I wanted to share it. The hypothesis is this. Because social media has become our number one means of engaging with the public, it has also become the environment in which we vent energy that could be spent on riots, rebellion, and ultimately revolution. For example, consider what happened when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. How did progressives respond to losing massive ground in one of their most sacred issues? They held a few protests and marches, and they sent 100 million angry tweets. There were no real-world consequences, and there probably never will be. Their problem wasn't that they weren't angry enough, but that they were angry online. Or consider leftism at large. There is no denying that socialism is more popular with the youth today than it was when Occupy happened. In my own estimation, the youth is a lot angrier today than it was in 2011, and the economic situation is more dire. So why hasn't there been a second Occupy? Why is it seemingly more difficult to organize mass movements, despite us being more connected than ever? Revolution has become something we daydream about, not something we work towards. I'm proposing that this is because we are interfacing in an environment incapable of hosting a revolution. We are all anonymous, and the product of past discussions are wiped clean each time we refresh our feeds.
So, is the fact that is social media just an outlet for our anxiety and frustration that prevents us from causing trouble, from rocking the boat? I imagine it plays a role, but it's not a single cause by any stretch. I mean, it's not.
It's not a single cause by any stretch. I would 100% agree with that. In fact, he's going to go into another potential cause in the next segment we have from this video. But I did want to kind of discuss that briefly, like that kind of idea that we waste so much goddamn time. It's almost as if, and was not intentional, but I just realized here they're on Reddit talking about socialism, talking about how social media keeps them from the revolution because it's a distraction, or it allows them to express those frustrations in a way that before, if
Feels
you were
cathartic.
a writer writing pamphlets and leaflets and shit, you were probably protesting or picketing or rioting or whatever.
Yeah. And then you have social media where everything feels very cathartic, but ultimately nothing gets accomplished. You might, get a signature page going on something that nobody pays attention to anyway. So like you just you lose all the energy. It's basically just taking all the all the wind out of your sails prior to you even really getting on the boat.
Yeah. I agree. Let's play the other part of this.
Was that deep? Was that meaningful? I hope that was deep.
I thought so.
Back to the topic of why we don't riot, why we don't overthrow the government, why we don't demand anything better.
It's hard.
Here's another comment to think about.
It's really, really hard.
I think it's mostly because people are old and fat.
oh,
The most violent
fuck you.
demographic, which is also going to be your soldiers, revolutionaries, criminals, reformists, is 15 to 30-year-old men. If you want to be hyper-reductionist, you could say the chief aim of a stable society is the ability to keep young men productive and in check until they age out of it. The U.S. is less reliant on productive young men, so it is content to keep them down. I don't think we've ever had a more effeminate, depressed, fat, inactive cohort in that demographic. Pair it with extended adolescence, dependency on higher education, lack of in-person relationships, cratered social trust, and a generally negative outlook on life, and it's clear the U.S. is far from any real civic
Pause here
conflict.
real quick.
Man, this is like modern day Ayn Rand.
I know, kind of, right? And this is on a fucking Marxist subreddit.
Yeah.
Um,
Nobody's immune from crazy shit.
yeah, but I mean, I don't think they're necessarily wrong, but I do think like extended adolescence, dependency on higher education.
Hey, I might be fat and active, but I am not effeminate. That's just silly.
That's just silly. Cratered social trust, I think, lack of
Oh, yeah.
in-person relationships.
Dude, here we are, BFFs, and we're fucking on the internet because we can't
That's
get together.
That's
Like,
right. But we're still preaching revolution.
We are. See,
And
we're
I've
doing the
done my
hard
fair
work.
share. I mean, I haven't done any like rioting or anything, like nothing illegal, but like I've been to a lot of protests.
Yeah.
I will never be the first one doing something.
To hurl a Campbell's
I'm
can.
not going to be the first one to get arrested.
Yeah.
But as you can see, like with the January 6th situation, not saying that I like that. In fact, that kind of scared me in some ways, as I've said before. But I wouldn't be the first guy. But once there were fucking 100 people doing it.
I was watching a video. It was about, for lack of me remembering, basically the follower effect, where you have the first person who gets into doing something and they seem in retrospect like this big leader who gets everything done, but really it was the second person who joined them and normalized it and, got people to be like, hey, there's two people doing things now. That's not so weird anymore. I might be able to join in on that and just vibe with whatever's going on.
Yeah.
In this case, it was a dance, but in the case we're talking about here, it's a riot. Like, hey, three people threw some bricks through glass. I can get in on that.
I can get down on that. Let's finish.
They can't arrest us all.
The part of KMO's comment that I wanted to include.
Okay, I've spoken to this topic many times, but not recently. So if you don't remember me saying it, or if you're new around here, yeah, it is young men who will do most anything, for status, for appreciation, and to get laid. They will put their lives on the line in ridiculous stunts just to show people, hey, look at me. I'm willing to risk my life for attention. Young men. They are willing to do crazy things. Their higher brain functions haven't solidified until age 25. They're risk takers. They're daredevils just by their nature. And every society has had its way of controlling that, of keeping the young men occupied with something useful, or even something not
like
useful
sending
but
them to
not
war.
destructive.
Right.
So, one thing to do, the sensible thing to do, I think, and this is what like the Amish do and other agrarian communities, you marry them off early so that sexual frustration is not an issue, and you put them to work and you give them some responsibility.
That part right there just floored me. I was like, you marry them off early? Like, that requires, and he follows it up with, to get rid of that sexual frustration. I'm like, that's some fucking, Handmaid's Tale shit right there. Just like, oh yeah. Well, no. Let me finish. So basically, the idea in his head is that married men get laid.
Right.
And you're doing it young, and you're doing it basically like probably you know, in the case of Amish, it's arranged, you know, and otherwise it's just the suggestion is basically like, hey, if guys are getting married, they're getting laid, and it's like, no, especially if they're young, like you would have to have a wife who was just like, oh, I've been trained that I have no worth. I simply give myself to you.
Okay, I can see that, especially that following from like the Amish or a lot of traditional where like they encourage kids to get married early. But I
Mhm.
think of like the Hispanic community.
Mhm.
Really common for people to get married very, very young, 18, 19, right? And especially in kind of more traditional, less acculturated or whatever it's called,
Integrated.
integrated. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, and I could totally see those fucking hornballs just like boning all the time. And then they have like a baby every 9 months or 10 months or whatever. And that, and in that case, then yes, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and
I
so it
think
has to be culturally acceptable for like just boning down the moment you're married, you know, with or without love, and guys get that. This part just struck me as a little misogynistic. I was just like, are you kidding me?
I think that's a fair assessment on your part. I also think that it kind of makes some sense, right? And it's
Mhm.
not just that. And he might say something else, but I'm thinking like for people who have kids, like I knew people who were dicking around and like had kids at like 17, 18, 19. And
Oh,
guess
dude.
what? For
Oh,
the
yeah.
most part, they skipped the 5 or 6 years of absolute bullshit
Mhm.
that we all did, like in college and
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, yeah.
And they got jobs and had families and started their life as adults
Oh, yeah, yeah.
because that's what they had to do. And so, in that respect, yeah, that's a good way to keep people from being angsty, is just keep them on the edge by making them have family like before they have the skills to demand a higher wage.
Bone
So
down,
they just
have
have to
some
hustle.
kids.
Yeah,
Well, that's
exactly.
interesting though, because like supposedly, you know, this current generation is much more asexual, and they're just like, I don't really need all that. I'm just like, good, interesting. Shit might fall apart.
Yeah, but the same thing could be said. You don't have to get married. You just have a stable girlfriend.
Yeah.
Because I did have a stable girlfriend when I was for several years during that period, one
Yeah.
towards the tail end, who I wound up marrying. But I did have a stable girlfriend for about the first 3 years of my, legal adulthood.
Yeah.
And I don't think it necessarily satiated those urges or
I can attest to the fact that it did not, because I
and
was the one driving you around in some cases.
and B, um, and B also I still did reckless shit. Like
Yeah.
probably some of the most reckless shit I did was when I was getting fucking laid all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
Like fucking every day.
Yeah, but you didn't have a regular job, and I think that he goes on to
Ah,
talk about regular jobs. So let's find out.
Ability. I mean, you don't leave them just as sort of useless appendages to the family and to the society well into their 20s. No, you put them to work, and as soon as they show competence at something, you give them more to do, and you give them more responsibility, and you turn them into adults early. That's the smart way to do it.
Oh, no, he didn't cover that at all.
What was your thought?
Oh, he's just trying to take away, so what I see the early 20s as it stands right now is the inevitable conclusion of like some sort of middle class. It's dying right now. It's on its last legs, where you got people going to college on either their parents' dime or scholarships or whatever, where they don't have to be horribly in debt. And so you have this like middle class having fun sort of thing, but that's dying out. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a kind of a truth to what he's saying, but I also don't. What he's basically saying is cultural. Like the whole idea of a teenager wasn't really human. And
Right.
maybe some of this we see is the consequence of being human. But to say that there were no revolutions
Hmm.
when men were starting families and having full-time fucking career-oriented jobs at 16 is incorrect.
Well, yeah. And we like to paint it, throughout history as like it's always these scholarly types that were born to wealth who ultimately came up with these ideas that, reformed society. And it's like that might be true on occasion. And I'm sure those people like to highlight their successes. But like for the most part, a lot of people that are causing revolution are like blue collar guys that are like, did you know that you can use violence to attain your means? Like, what? Yeah, I watched it. We could do the same thing.
I do agree that it tends to be younger people that wage revolution, but that has more to do with physicality and the fact that warfare is fucking hard. But you know what? There are a
Yeah.
lot of people trained and fit enough to wage war at 60 in this country. So to blow it off and be like, oh, there's too old and too fat and too effeminate or whatever fucking other things these fucking supposed black pilled socialists or whatever the handle was. I don't understand the pills. I'm just out of the loop. I don't hang out on the
There was
internet
no
now.
black pill in the Matrix, so I lost.
Yeah, I guess so. At any rate, my point being is that I know lots of very masculine 60-year-old fit men who
Yeah.
espouse in the spaces I am on social media that are actively, to his credit, in face-to-face relationships with other men,
Mhm.
training at the rifle range, doing ruck marches, preparing themselves to wage a civil conflict and a revolution.
Yeah.
So maybe what they're saying is that we as leftists are fucking weak.
I think what it
And because the
ignores
fascists are fucking ready. Sorry, go ahead.
and yeah, you're absolutely right. The fascists are ready on the muscle on the ground forum, but like what can be utilized well after you can't do anything physical anymore is the idea of waging war from the armchair.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if you're 60 and you have mobility issues. If you are a grade A hacker, or if you are really good at like writing slogans that can I'll get people going. Like warfare takes many different forms, and
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
We were just talking about the propaganda function
Yeah,
of potentially of this coup. Right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like Vladimir Putin doesn't have to step onto a battlefield to get shit done. He just is like, I have an idea. Let's try this and see what happens. We have nothing to lose if it fails.
Not to mention Ukraine just like instituted a draft for a couple different cities.
Yeah.
And they conscripted every man between 16 and 60.
Mm-hmm.
So to say, oh, you're only fucking, I mean, obviously that's conscription, it's different than but
Yeah.
to say that like you're just at 30 disinterested in like concepts like liberty, right?
Is conscription somehow different from selective service? But like we have, I mean, it seems to be much
No.
more. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Is like the end result is the same. I did not want to do war. I am doing war, but like the legality of it is more along the lines of like everyone is required to do this as part of being a male citizen,
Well,
as opposed to like we need you right here, right now. You are in the army, or else.
No, I'm not sure if it was a selective service thing. I imagine all the men were signed up anyway. I think that was a call to duty for all of those men.
Oh, so basically bringing up the army reserves.
Or taking people who haven't been trained and aren't technically reservists
Oh,
and
gotcha.
pulling them in and sending them to
That's
3 weeks or
okay,
4
yeah.
weeks of fucking training before they send
Yeah.
them into their 45-minute one-way trip into the fucking meat grinder.
They'll get out. It'll be fine. They'll be circling around the outer edges. They'll fall.
We
over.
have 15 minutes. How big is this section? Can you pull it up?
Huge. And it's super bright for some reason. I hate it.
Can you scroll in so I
Yeah.
can read?
Whoop.
Weep, weep.
Let me whoop, whoop, okay. No, too far.
I still can't read it. So I'm gonna
Do you wanna lead it from your feed?
No.
Okay.
I just kind of wanted you to scroll in.
Well, I can, but it like cuts off here. Tell you what, let me download. That's it was Unabomber.pdf.
Or you can read it.
Well, I'm trying to get it open.
Oh, wait. I got it. I was making the dashboard full screen, and I just needed to make the other one full screen, the actual window that you're displaying that in. And then I'll need to back out one click so I can read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I was going to put it in PDF and read it that way. Let's see. I wonder if that would look any better.
Okay, we were talking about surrogate activities. So can you scroll down to 38?
30.
How big is this section? Can we just read the whole thing?
It is one page.
That's it?
Yep.
It's all out blurry now, man. You have the link in the tracker?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me just a second.
We'll head on back to Docking Bay 94, while we await the weekly shipment of Bantha burgers at Dex's Diner.
Thank you, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, people. Wait a second. This is the MK Ultra document. That's not it.
It says Unabomber Man. Look at this week's.
Sorry, people. Do you have any more final comments on that thing we were talking about?
No, man, no. I spent my last 2 days thinking about Valheim and getting iron to redecorate my base because I'm having a fun time with that survival game where you play a Viking and fight against Nordic-inspired enemies. And working on learning a little bit of Python, just enough to turn on some valves and a cooler. It's been an interesting time.
And of course, now I can't find it.
I put it. It's on the Cuckoo for Cocoa Puff or Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs thing under Theodore Kaczynski. Look down. There's a link.
Yeah, that's MK Ultra.
That's not it. It says it's his manifesto. If you read it, it just says manifesto. Oh, it just says Unabomber Manifesto as the title.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah. It's got over socialization, everything we were talking about last time. The hamburgers aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Oh, look at us.
Jesus Christ. Why did it take so long?
It's a link, dude. It's a link.
Okay. So you still have yours up, right?
Yeah. What?
I'm going to read it from my side so I can actually read it. All right. Surrogate activities, paragraph 38. But not every leisured aristocrat. Oh, nope. We have to back up, don't we?
I was thinking we were at 33.
We were.
See, I'm better at this, do you think?
Hey, this isn't even a complete one. Son of a bitch. That's weird. It skips from introduction to the power process. Skipping a whole bit on fucking the leftist stuff. What kind of fucking leftist was the one who...
Is your copy fucked up or something? I've got everything.
I'm reading it. So we start at the power process. Human beings have a need, probably based in biology, for something that we'll call the power process. It's related to the need for power, which is widely recognized, but it's not quite the same thing. The power process has 4 elements. The 3 most clear-cut of these we will call goal, effort, and attainment of goal. Everyone needs to have goals whose attainment requires effort and needs to succeed in attaining at least some of his goals. He could have benefited probably from an editor.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so the guy was considered to be a genius. He got into college when he was 16, which is it's impressive, but it's not that impressive.
Ivy League.
Right. Well, does that really even mean anything? but then he failed
did.
horribly at all things social. And so, like, let that be reflected in a lot of what he writes. Is like socially, he was not successful. Didn't do well with people. Had some very antisocial behaviors involving poo-poo, and very much didn't fit in
Right.
with the ladies. Is what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I am missing stuff. I have 38, 40, 38, and 41. So I guess I'll just read those.
Which link are you using? Is it
I
in
don't
today's?
fucking know. And I want to be done in 10 minutes. Well,
I'll just
still
read it.
have
Which one of it?
I have 30 gallons of compost tea that I've just finished brewing that I didn't have a chance because dinner ran long to distribute. I have to mix that
Okay.
5 to
Well, I'm
1
gonna read
with
this.
water. Okay,
Because I
go
can
ahead.
do this. Number 34.
Do it.
Consider the hypothetical case of a man who can have anything he wants just by wishing it. Such a man has power, but he will develop serious psychological problems. At first, he will have a lot of fun, but by and by, he will become acutely bored and demoralized. Eventually, he may become clinically depressed. History shows that leisured aristocracies tend to become decadent. This is not true of fighting aristocracies that have to struggle to maintain their power, but leisured, secure aristocracies that have no need to exert themselves usually become bored, hedonistic, and demoralized. Sounds good to me, except for the demoralized part. Even though they have power. This shows that power is not enough. One must have goals towards which to exercise one's power. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that idea a lot because
I mean,
it's kind of common sense, but I had never really thought about it much. And I think we might have actually talked about that.
I mean, we have. I mean, I know that I've definitely on this channel at one point or another talked about how, like, I personally don't get bored easily because there's just so much that I could be doing at any given point. So it's hard to imagine, like, oh, I'm stuck in a rut. It's like, well, if I get stuck in a rut, I can just look at the miles long list of shit that I want to do or have never tried before and try something there. Like,
Great. Yeah.
get past the boredom, bro.
Yeah, let's talk about surrogacy because this was the idea I wanted to engage with the most, and we have like 7 minutes.
All right, but not every leisured aristocrat becomes bored and demoralized. For example, Emperor Hirohito, instead of sinking into decadent
Can you
hedonism,
just slow down a little bit?
devoted himself to marine biology, a field in which he became distinguished. When people do not have to exert themselves to satisfy their physical needs, they often set up artificial goals for themselves. In many cases, they then pursue these goals with the same energy and and emotional involvement that they otherwise would have put into the search for physical necessities. Thus, the aristocrats of the Roman Empire had their leisure or literary pretensions. Many European aristocrats, a few centuries ago, invested tremendous time and energy into hunting, though they certainly didn't need the meat. Other aristocracies have competed for status through elaborate displays of wealth, and a few aristocrats, like Hirohito, have turned to science.
Okay, so I think that is kind of a really interesting idea that I kind of latched onto. And I was thinking about that with the question about how is social media affecting the revolution? Well, wealthy people can pretend, or affluent or middle class or just materially comfortable people, which is, for all intents and purposes, the vast majority of the United States population.
I mean, I would divide it into the thinking class, where you have people that are like thinking big thoughts, having good fun.
But my point is that, like, maybe that's more of a reason than men are too effeminate or whatever, right? Like, maybe that's part of the reason is that indeed it kind of lends towards the social media argument, which is people get to cosplay revolutionary online.
Yeah.
It's why you can get some people to spend a ton of energy talking about their leftist cred and all this other stuff, or being in chats on certain like fucking indie left news media, like live streams and shit, and the vast majority of them don't do anything outside of that. And that's what really frustrates me. Again, I'm going to make it about myself because that's how I do. But
We all do. That's how we all do, man.
But it's really frustrating being like, oh yeah, you don't know, like, you know, your idea is your idea and that doesn't apply to everybody. And it's like, this isn't my first fucking rodeo. For some of the people that I interacted with online, it's like I was living in an anarchist commune doing mutual aid work before your fucking balls dropped out of your abdomen. So shut the fuck up when you tell me I don't know what I'm fucking talking about. Thank you. Like, it's like anarchist communes fucking organizing here locally for a long time. Even when I was in the military, I camped in Occupy Wall Street. I organized basically like a situationist type protest when the city of Dover opened a little parklet but didn't put any fucking benches in it because it was hostile architecture. So we went dumpster diving, and instead, and that's surrogacy. I'll freely admit I didn't need to dumpster dive. And I wasn't affected by the lack of a bench because I never went down there anyway. Right? I just didn't like the idea of a park without a bench.
Yeah.
So I protested. But my point is that like you get these people online in online social media spaces where they can kind of hide behind a degree of anonymity.
Yeah.
And everybody knows everything because I have an internet. It's like you need more than just to like read a couple articles. I think part of the reason we're so fucking stupid, the left especially is so fucking stupid, is because we have access to so much information and no skill to put it together into a coherent narrative, like for our purposes. It's just like, and they'll listen to anybody say anything. Like I've seen a lot of this, like, oh, Greta said 5 years ago that the world was going to end if we didn't stop using fossil fuels in 5 years or whatever. And it's like, no, I think what they're referring to is the science that says like we were going to pass the point of no return. And then they're like, well, what's the point in saying we're past the point of no return? Then no one's going to want to do anything for climate change. Right. That's the fucking point. Right. But then they spend fucking 2.5 hours talking about how like it's some like, I mean, I agree it's total propaganda bullshit. Like I think the media just likes stories like that. Like, oh, look, the little retarded girl talking about climate change. Right. Like, or whatever. The media just likes those schoolhood fucking stories. What? Because I said the R word?
Part of it. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what the media is. That's how the media, like, oh, here's this special needs kid that's doing all this good stuff for climate or talking all good on climate. That's what I mean. And I think the media execs are probably like, hey, put the little, we need to fill this hour, put the retarded girl on, right? Like, I don't have any beef against her. I'm in fact right now in this space defending her and saying like, yeah, okay, she's kind of become like a media puppet, but at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that the science is fucking clear. We are past the point of no return. And then you see these people masquerading as like, oh, we take things seriously, but like, we're just going to also latch onto these very right-wing fascistic narratives that like everything is a goddamn conspiracy and that climate change itself must have been manufactured by the elite to keep the working class down. Like if that's your working class revolution, I want no fucking part in it. Sorry.
Rant? I'm sure a lot of people have said this before in one way or another, but I'm very appreciative that there is a group of people who thinks that the government is both incredibly inept and so deeply, entrenched that they can do all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories. Just like pick one, they're inept, or they're incredibly intelligent and manipulating everything.
Before you read the next paragraph,
yeah,
I just want to say last night I was watching fucking Tucker Carlson talking about energy and industrial capacity and economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. It's mostly fact. I wouldn't interpret it the way he did. Fact. I'm not really interpreting the fact that quite that way. But Brooke walked out and my partner walked out and she was like, what the fuck? It's like, you're watching fucking Tucker Carlson. And I was like, come on, man. Like, have you ever known me to be a person who's incapable of using critical thinking skills and being like, well, Tucker said it, so it's true, right? Like, No, if anything, my greatest consistency in my life is that I fucking question everything.
As long as you fuck the tuck, I'm okay with that.
I don't fuck with the tuck, except I was interested in what he had to say because he has influence over people. And if people are getting almost all of the story straight from him, then it makes it easier to get all the way. Because they've already absorbed most of what they need to know from this guy. They just need someone else to alter the interpretation towards, the proper direction. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that covers it. Yeah, I'm good. Good.
Okay, great. Let's read another paragraph.
All right. We use the term surrogate activity to designate an activity that is directed towards an official or an artificial goal that people set up for themselves merely in order to have some goal to work towards, or let us say merely for the sake of fulfillment that they get from pursuing the goal. Is that a bad thing?
I think what he's calling into question here, and it kind of fits into his critique of the left.
Yeah.
When he was talking about like all of the white, we discussed a couple Mondays ago, all of the white people that seem to be far more concerned about policing people's language around like minorities than the fucking minorities themselves.
Right.
Right. And again, that's a type of surrogacy where it's like, you are creating this because you do not need to do anything for your daily life. Like you will use the words where you're like, Trump is a monster. He's separating kids in cages. But when it comes to going back to the meme culture, thank you, Jesus, for the food that blesses our table. And in the next frame, he's like, de nada, because it's a fucking Mexican person or whatever that like picks all of our fucking food, right? Anyway, that's the kind of thing. It's surrogacy. Like you care about it, but you don't. Because when it actually comes to the choices you make, and the fights you're willing to fight, you're not willing to put in 80 hours a week growing your own vegetables when the Mexicans will do it under exploited conditions for way cheaper.
Oh, for sure. And we all do it.
I grow some of my own vegetables.
When was the last time you had corn, my friend?
Corn, like sweet corn?
Yeah.
I grew some a few years ago. I don't actually like it.
Oh my God.
It's not a fucking vegetable. It's a goddamn grain. You have to
nixtamalize
it and grind it down and sift it apart and process it before you can get nutrition out of it. That's why when you eat sweet corn and you take a shit, most of the sweet corn is in your shit.
No, it's only that. Oh, see, that is a common misconception. As long as you're chewing enough, for a product that is like not easily digested, what you're seeing is the outer hull of each of the individual
kernels.
Kernels. Everything on the inside is usually digested.
Okay, fine.
It's just the cellulose layer. We can't break down cellulose. We ain't cows. Which is why we can feed corn to cows if we're not busy turning it into ethanol.
But you probably don't want to feed corn to cows because it's
no. It's very bad for them. They have to give them like all kinds of supplements and like.
And sometimes like
pretty bad.
Sometimes they'll straight up like cut a hole in them and then put like a surgical
sampling
device.
Tube. Yeah.
To help bleed the gas out of them.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Anyway,
they're products.
We got two more paragraphs.
We do. I haven't even gotten through this.
I'm sorry.
Here is a rule of thumb for the identification of surrogate activities. Given a person who devotes much time and energy to the pursuit of goal X, ask yourself this. If he had to devote most of his time and energy to satisfying his biological needs, and if that effort required him to use his physical and mental faculties in a varied and interesting way, would he feel seriously deprived because he did not attain goal X? So basically, if you're at subsistence wages, are you going to be able to be interested in an outside goal?
I think kind of, yeah. When he's talking about power being tied to goals and how in our system, in the industrial system where people don't have to toil for their own biological needs, We
Mhm.
create artificial goals to give us purpose, I think is what he's saying.
Well, no, it said if he had to devote most of his time and energy to satisfying his biological needs,
Mhm.
and if providing for that required a lot of thought, would he feel deprived of an artificial goal? Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would he feel deprived of an artificial goal? Meaning, like,
Well, I
I
don't
spent
think he'd feel deprived because he'd be too busy and exhausted by the end
he
of the
wouldn't
day.
have an artificial goal.
Most likely, or if he did, it would be like a daydream that he thinks about as he falls asleep for a few minutes.
Yeah,
Like,
and so to a degree, he's almost calling out. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
I am, yes,
Yeah,
but it sounds like a cop out. But go ahead and explain it in case people watching don't know what it is.
Maslow's hierarchy. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist or sociologist back in the day, like the 50s, 60s, I think. Anyway, he came up with this hierarchy of needs where, like, you can't have, you can't worry about your basic security until you have like food, water, air, whatever.
Bottom line,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, and then you can't have meaningful friendships with people unless you meet basic security and all these other things.
Yeah.
And then at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the hierarchy, and the ultimate goal of being human is self-actualization, which means being able to pursue whatever passion you want. And so
Right.
in a lot of ways, this concept of surrogacy almost sounds like he's knocking the top of the fucking pyramid off. The only reason we have self-actualization as a goal is because we don't actually have to fucking work for what we need to sustain us, because we get it via fossil fuels and industrial mode of production. Yeah. Makes
So
sense to me.
basically, like, I mean, I think that the hierarchy of needs exists with or without it. But yes, you're basically saying that, like, we just cheat coded our way to the top for a while.
Yeah, and you see that breaking down now, maybe in a way that it wasn't when he was writing this.
Right. Well, yeah, and
Like,
that's
where you see the lower tiers of the pyramid just being evaporated. People are dying on the street of exposure or hunger or all these preventable diseases, and they're ostracized by society, where, like, no one even wants to fucking talk to them when they're just sitting on a park bench enjoying the sunshine, right? Like,
yeah. Well, and I just had an interesting thought: is more of us are willing to complain about a pothole on, or at this intersection or another, than we are to complain about how there are people in our community who aren't being fed. Like,
oh,
we'd
100%.
almost, like, we'd almost rather go upwards on the hierarchy to avoid the fact that people in our immediate vicinity are not even at the bottom.
Yep, and
Like,
that's
shit.
self-actualization. I want to be myself and be able to express myself, and then they go on social media and they get that while the rest of it falls apart, but they somehow feel satisfied. And I
Yeah.
don't think people feel satisfied. And in fact, I know there's data that shows teenage girls are fucking killing themselves because of social media.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not a good thing, but it's quite interesting just kind of thinking about the way that these kind of human experiences are mediated by, I guess, the post-industrial capitalist system, right? When we reach this kind of, like, decorporealized, I don't know the word for it, disembodied kind of digital spaces and stuff like that.
Uncarnate.
Uncarnate.
Yeah. It's the opposite of incarnate.
Uncarnate.
Yeah. Outside of physical existence.
Okay. I think disembodied sounds okay too, right?
Damn.
Whatever.
It
There's
sounds
lots of
cool.
words. English is a fantastic fucking language. We got lots of ways to say the same fucking thing.
We have stolen so many ways of saying things.
We really have. Yeah, I think we got one more paragraph.
We do.
Because we're over time by 10 minutes, by the way.
We are. We got two more, but I'll go quick and ram them all into one. Oh no, we didn't even finish this last one. We didn't talk
Okay,
about
and don't speed read through it. Read it at a pace where people can enjoy it.
All right.
The sound of your
lovely
smooth
voice.
baritone. I don't know if you're a baritone. I don't know music.
I
Sorry,
have
go ahead.
no idea what I am. Hirohito's studies in marine biology clearly constituted a surrogate activity, since it is pretty certain that if Hirohito had had to spend time working at interesting non scientific tasks in order to obtain the necessities of life, he would have not felt deprived because he didn't know all about the anatomy and life cycles of marine animals. And I think that's what I was getting at is like, even in ancient Greece, they recognize like we would not have this literal thinking class, these philosophers, if we did not have an
Slaves.
abundance from the farm. Well, yes, in their instance, slaves and an abundance
Or energy
of
slaves.
supplies that slaves led to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fossil fuels are energy slaves. In fact, I don't have the numbers on me. I might have mentioned them before, but Nate Hagens, who did his doctoral thesis on fucking energy, specifically fossil energy and return on investment.
Yeah.
But he figured it's something like each barrel of oil is like 50,000. It's like basically like 12 years of fucking labor of one human. So like,
Well, yeah, and imagine all the labor of the algae that created it.
perhaps, yeah. I mean, if you want to go that way, but I was just thinking of tapping into those fossil energy resources, and like that's essentially the slaves. And I said this, and this is I've been thinking about writing like a short like pamphlet, not like a manifesto like this, but like a short pamphlet of like inconvenient truths for the left. And
Mhm.
one of those is like, hey, guess what? Slavery was not something that was like uniquely bad in America, and slavery didn't end because we got smart. Slavery ended because we had better sources of energy that were cheaper than slaves.
And didn't
And the
rebel
reality is
rebellion.
we're going back to slavery,
Yeah.
whether through incarceration or human trafficking or migrant labor where they take their papers and stuff so they can't fucking leave.
Right.
I mean, we have slavery returning. Why? Because fossil fuels aren't as cheap and as abundant as they used to be. That's just the nature of it. One class will exploit another class for its labor. And in the case of fossil fuels, that's why there was so much abundance. That's why America was great. It wasn't because like we had these great ideals that we somehow shifted far away from. No, it's we had fucking 100-to-1 energy return on energy invested, and now we have 20.
But Mr.
Things are
Solo,
getting worse because we don't have that anymore. The boomers fucking burned it up. Sorry, go ahead. I look like I'm a madman because I'm fucking so hot, but that's part of the reason I wanted to rap is because like this room just gets so hot, and my
But
kids
Mr.
are
Solo.
across the hall. The wind's not blowing. Sorry, and it was warm today. It was like almost 90. Go
Oh
ahead.
man, we got it. Oh, it's going to get worse. Have you seen next week's forecast?
Yeah, 109 forecast.
Oh, only
Friday.
we're at like 113, I think, over here. Yeah.
Man, I will take
At that point, it
85
doesn't
all
matter.
summer for a week of 110.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh,
It's
yeah,
better than
it's true.
100
That's
every
nice.
fucking day for fucking 4 months.
Yeah, man, we are not going to get to where we are. You want to call it after this one?
No, finish reading the section.
That's what I'm saying. On the other
Well,
hand, the
yeah.
pursuit of sex and love, for example, is not a surrogate activity because most people, even if their existence were otherwise satisfactory, would feel deprived if they passed their lives without ever having a relationship with a member of the opposite sex. But pursuit of an excessive amount
Or
of
same
sex,
sex.
right, more than one really needs, can be a surrogate activity. Steve, you're pursuing surrogate activities. Mr. Solo.
No, I'm
Oh my
not.
God.
Not anymore.
I'm
I'm now the 30 plus. I'm the old and fat.
Yes,
unwilling to be
that's true. Unwilling
rebellious.
to make the changes because it might hurt too much. In modern industrial society, only minimal effort is necessary to satisfy one's physical needs. It is enough to go through a training program to acquire some petty technical skill, then come to work on time and exert the very modest effort needed to hold a job. The only requirement are a moderate amount of intelligence and, most of all, simply obedience. Yes, read it again.
Does that
Obedience.
not sound like the precursor of like a Jordan Peterson?
I don't follow him.
I don't really follow him that closely, but I know he's most famous for telling young men to make their bed. It's like the first step of them becoming like, productive members of society.
Making your bed is pointless. You're just going to unmake it later
That's
on.
what my fucking point is.
I also have this fight with my wife all the time, so I just do the smart thing and get out of the way and let her make the bed.
Let me ask you this. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we're over time by 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How often during your waking day do
Mhm.
you just go lay on the bed?
Since being unemployed / working from home, more than usual, I would say probably
20
3
minutes a
times.
day?
Probably like, oh, I mean, just number of times. I would say I do it more than just going to sleep at night, about every third day.
Hmm.
Like I'll just lay down and look at my phone or something like that.
And then how often does your partner do it?
Less often.
Really?
Yeah.
I have the opposite thing. My partner
Yeah.
more or less lives laying flat on the fucking bed
Oh, no.
most of the time.
Most of the time,
And
she hates it. She much rather be out on the
interesting.
couch or on one of these lovely, mesh chairs that we have that help
So,
you breathe.
but she's the one that wants to make the bed.
Yeah.
Okay, you threw my whole fucking theory out because my
Yeah.
theory was
Sorry, it is a
people
weird
that want to make
habit
the
that she
bed are
has
the
done.
ones that want to lay in the bed when they're not sleeping.
You know how throughout life there are times when you can exercise control
Mhm.
and you develop habits based around the few times you can exercise control? These are the things that happen.
Son of a bitch. All right,
So
continue this paragraph. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, it's just very, very true that so much about ourselves is about what little exercise we can control,
That's true.
what control we can exert, and that explains a lot of why we do things. In modern industrial society, oh wait, no, I read that. Obedience. If one has those, society takes care of one from cradle to grave. Yes, there is an underclass that cannot take the physical necessities for granted, but we are speaking here of mainstream society.
Mhm.
Let's see. Thus, it is not surprising that modern society is full of surrogate activities. These include scientific work, athletic achievement, humanitarian work, artistic and literary creation, climbing the corporate ladder, acquisition of money, material goods, far beyond the point at which they cease to give any additional physical satisfaction, and social activism when it addresses issues that are not. This is the longest run-on sentence ever, sir. That are not important for the activist personally, as in the case of white activists who work for the rights of non-white minorities. I
There you go.
love, oh god, I love how he lumps together like scientific work, humanitarian work, with like climbing the corporate ladder
And
and
with
all these
like upper middle class social justice warriors.
yeah, and then like kind of crams them all together and is like, no one who is one thing can possibly care about someone else legitimately and um, with any amount of truth, is what I'm getting from reading all this. And it's like, dude, I think you're like pushing things outward. You can't identify with anyone outside of your select group, and you're just assuming everyone else does the same. Like, it really just seems like this is the really antisocial aspect of his personality coming to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I do think there's a degree of truth in that, is that most of the things we call civilization would not exist without exploitation.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a matter of exploitation of what? Like, we could get pretty far with simply exploiting animals and grain. Like, we didn't have to exploit other sentient beings. We chose to take that step. But like, just having like chickens, cows, corn, all that good shit, like, we could have had a pretty great existence. We didn't have to enslave other people. We didn't have to like burn down forests and shit like that.
But you did,
It-
because that's how they had the energy to cook the stuff, and et cetera, so forth. And so, like, a lot of it is, I mean, it's a complicated
but I
story, and
mean,
it's uneven, but
from that point of view, it's almost like mankind just shouldn't exist, though.
I think that he would probably agree.
Yeah. And in the circles that I run in that are like science fictiony and such, that theory has been roundly rejected. It's basically the idea, and I'm not going to do it justice, and it's probably going to sound pretty bad, is that it's better to have a self-aware group that exists for a very short period of time due to its lack of like temperance than it is for that group to never exist. Because otherwise the universe is just inanimate matter completely unable to reflect upon its own existence, and that's pretty boring.
I see. All right, last paragraph.
These are not always pure surrogate activities where for many people they may be motivated in part by the needs other than the need to have some goal to pursue. Scientific work may be motivated in part by the drive for prestige, artistic creation by a need to express feelings, militant social activism by hostility. But for most people who pursue them, these activities are in large part surrogate activities. For example, the majority of scientists will probably agree that the fulfillment that they get from their work is more important than the money and the prestige that they earn.
Read the next one.
I bet their wives, appreciate the the monetary stuff. Like, cool, I can get the kids, food and drugs as necessary. 41. For many, if not most people, surrogate activities are less satisfying than the pursuit of real goals. That is, goals that people would want to attain, even if their need for power or for the power process were already fulfilled. One indication of this is the fact that in many or most cases, people who are deeply involved in surrogate activities are never satisfied, never at rest. Thus, the moneymaker constantly strives for more and more wealth. The scientist no sooner solves one problem than he moves on to the next. The long distance runner drives himself to run always farther and faster. Everyone stops at the 10K. Many people who pursue surrogate activities will say that they get far more fulfillment from these activities than they do from the mundane business of satisfying their biological needs. Well, no shit. I don't want to brush my teeth or teeth and wipe my ass. I fucking want to have a good time.
That's a Rick and Morty reference.
It is.
Been a while.
But that is because there's no way you can do it so wrong. You die.
There's no way to wipe your ass or brush your teeth so wrong that you can die.
Oh my god.
Anyway,
brushing your teeth you can. Anyway. But that is because in our society, the effort needed to satisfy the biological needs has been reduced to triviality. And it's absolutely true. You go to the store, you get rice, you get fucking, some meat, some vegetables, boom, you got a meal, and you can do it any time of the day. If you forget, you can get in your car and go and get what you forgot in a matter of minutes with no second thought. Because you know what? You paid the car insurance. You're paying for, the gas. And if you can afford to do it, why shouldn't you?
Right. And so I think it's just kind of interesting that he's about that idea that like not being satisfied with surrogate activities. I think he also misinterprets it. I don't think the drive is just to continue to have a goal for power attainment. Like with a scientist, it's like, no, it's just what he does when he's done looking at one thing, he looks at something else until he fucking retires. Right? Yeah. And it's part of his lifestyle too, because even after he retires, he's probably still keeping up with like the most cutting edge thinking in his discipline, et cetera, so forth.
Yeah. There are so many people that are just like, oh yeah, I absolutely used to be involved in immunology, and I keep up on it in my off time. It's just like I keep up on computers. I'm not paid to do it. I like computers. It's cool. That's the sort of thing we're talking about.
But it's interesting too, because I kind of was like starting to see, like I was talking to you offline about TikTok and how I kind of left TikTok because it just felt to me like people are in the space giving advice to other people and they never put in the time yet. Yeah. And it's just like, they just like, we're like, oh, we're home a lot because we're working from home with our nice tech jobs. And now we have the time to like plant a little garden and we'll just like make a really popular TikTok channel while people who actually have been doing the hard fucking work are too fucking busy to do TikTok right. Because growing vegetables is not a fucking hobby that they're now afforded the time to do because of COVID. Like for me, it is a hobby, but it's almost that this idea of surrogacy is a mindset. Like I'm gardening so that I have a skill that benefits me outside of the industrial system, so that my family can eat cleaner and have better health, so that I have the practice and the relationship with the natural processes, much like any indigenous person would have had, walking through a part of their territory. right?
Right,
Looking at the
right.
plants. Oh, I remember when this was just a little sprout. I remember seeing this when it's a sprout, and now it's a big shrub, right? Like that kind of thing. Having a relationship with your place. And it's like kind of interesting, and we'll have to talk about it more in the future because we're just about out of time, or we are past out of time, but we can wrap with a clean less than an hour and 30. It's just kind of like, I don't know, I waffle between like, is everything I do just like a fucking farce because it's not necessary, or like is there a kind of attitudinal dimension to surrogate activities, right? Like
Oh,
you
there's
said, I'm just
absolutely.
interested in computers. I'm not doing it because I have some power goal, right? Like I'm not trying to be the best at computers. Yeah,
Right. It's not going to make me
it's a good
money.
way to
I'm
kill
not
fucking
hacking
time.
anyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good way to kill time. It is an interest. It occasionally like rises to the surface where it's like, hey, someone actually needs a skill that I have. Like,
But nonetheless, it's not required for your actual biological needs. Whereas, like the
God,
permaculture stuff is a lot closer to necessary to biological needs.
I think you'll find that the decline of the farmer in the US and the lack of seriousness that you see demonstrated when you go to these permaculture things are very intertwined. It's basically just the subsistence is boring for a lot of people because if they're not like deeply concerned about microbiomes and shit like that, they're very unlikely to ever get super deep into permaculture. Like if they're like, I think you have to want to go a certain distance for that to actually take it very seriously. Like if you're not like, oh, what sort of bacteria are going to need to be present in my soil for things to grow really, really well, and how can I encourage them? If
Yeah.
that's not a question you wonder about, knowing about bacteria, then you're probably not going to be too awful interested in the idea of permaculture overall. It takes that sort of wonderment, I think, to really get involved with it.
I think that's fair. But I mean, just broadly speaking, I think you agree. I can agree with most of that, but you know, I think I don't know, like I guess it's a surrogate activity when people are like, I just feel really bad that, I'm white and so I'm gonna go do a bunch of like restoration work with indigenous people or whatever. Like that's kind of a surrogate activity, but then at the same time, this is why I'm saying it must be attitudinal. I know people who like, yeah, I guess it's a surrogate activity because it's not actually procuring calories for them, but they're also recognizing like an ecosystem, right?
Well,
And
it directly
a
affects them
desire
as
to
well.
restore a functional ecosystem that will provide
Yeah.
for something else. So it's not this kind of almost animalistic, like almost kind of Hobbesian worldview that he has, or that he kind of portrays through his writing, where everybody's out for themselves and has to procure their own calories. I don't think that necessarily makes everything a surrogate activity if you don't grow your own food or live like a subsistence lifestyle. However, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so it's really interesting coming from Ted Kaczynski, like smart guy, and so you would think that he would know that like just knowing how to subsist is not enough. Like he couldn't have gotten where he was. Like the college that trained him wouldn't have existed without excess.
100%. That's why I always say when we begin the conversation about how to provide reparations to the descendants of African slaves or whatever, first place you go is all the institutions where that fucking slave owner money went. No, seriously, strip them of all their fucking endowments and use it. And I'm totally fine with the government taking on part of that too as a taxpayer. Like I think it's a debt owed, but I think we should definitely go after those institutions and strip them of all of their wealth.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's everything, like all these nonprofit foundations, anything that can be traced back to money.
I'm for stripping
chattel slavery.
most people of their wealth, just because like, okay, cool, you got deeded some land because you were part of the westward expansion and you found oil on it. And now your family is rich. How's that fucking fair?
It's not fair.
Like you get a profit from that forever. Like, shouldn't that land come back into the public commons like after one lifetime or something like that? Like, cool, thanks. Like you got to raise yourself, your kids, your grandkids off of that, benefit.
That's
After that, give it up. Come on. Anyway,
At any rate, so today we talked about coups potentially in Russia. We talked about the things holding us back from staging a coup and or revolution in the United States.
we're lazy, fat, and effeminate, apparently.
and effeminate, yeah, exactly, because that totally describes how I think about myself.
Yes. It's these darn boobs.
I know. It's okay. Yeah. Something to talk about offline too. Not necessarily your boobs, but just boobs in general.
There are subreddits for that.
I'm sure there are. I was gonna say my lab test results. I found the VA drug tested me, and it like kind of spooked me a little bit.
Oh.
Because I was like, why the fuck are you drug testing me? I told you I smoke a lot of weed.
Yeah.
And then you look at the thing, it's like barbiturates negative, opiates negative. It's like cannabinoids, and it's like off the fucking charts.
Double
I was like, I
plus
fucking told you,
good.
bro.
Yeah.
I fucking told you, bro. At any rate, then we read some stuff on surrogacy and had an interesting conversation. We will continue reading Uncle Ted's manifesto next week. It's been fun, and remember, folks, when liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause.
Bye-bye. We need to have an outro card.